One thing that's always fascinated me about second screens and different platforms is the blending of formats. So, in fact, print has an opportunity to transcend its limitations of its format. It can start to introduce video and music and something more interactive. How do you see that playing out as all different platforms seem to merge?
Well, on the positive side, as you've just noted, it creates a lot of opportunity. On the negative side, it could mean everybody's competing in the same way for everyone else. That takes us back to the question you just asked, which is how do you value it? So I think we're going to understand more about how consumers engage with media and what that means. As you know, there's a lot of measurement, biometrics and eye tracking, et cetera, that want to get at people's sentiment and their heart rate and various measures that talk about how people are engaging. The reality is we have a lot to learn. That may be one piece of it, but we're going to learn a lot about consumer action. And action can be as simple as remembering, or it can, used to call that awareness, or it can be as complicated as going to buy. But we've already seen a huge growth in the space with purchase funnel kind of measures. The danger is that we look at everything in an action-oriented way as if it were direct advertising and not remembering that sometimes people don't act directly. Understanding that complexity is going to be critical to being able to place value.
You've been working on a lot of fascinating projects that we've talked about. What are your learnings from these projects?
I think one of the learnings is, number one, you can never fully be on top of what you're doing because it's always changing. But some of the aspects of that change are really important. Most of my work has been with media companies, and for example, the competitive set's changing. We talked about print for a minute ago, and a magazine's competitive set used to be other magazines. But now, if you think about all the people who compete in different kind of content, whether it's travel or fashion or parenting, suddenly you're operating in a whole different world. As I mentioned, I've done some work in social TV analytics. That means that you have to stay on top of the changing forms of measurement. And organizations are changing. Sales forces are becoming much more fluent. We talked about this in analog and digital. Agencies are looking at new ways to think cross-platform. The emergence of big data and what that means for both sides of the business is huge. I've been talking to some companies in that space, and the plans that they have and the way they're thinking about using it, which unfortunately I can't talk about right now, are fascinating. And I think the agencies are trying to be very smart about bringing in whole new sets of analytics as well. So I think we're going to see a lot of change in that area too.
So looking ahead, say the next 3 to 5 years, how do you see the media landscape? Let's talk about predictions.
I think that there will be some fallout in places where there are a number of players right now. They just can't all survive with the competitive nature of what's going on. There is some discussion, and I'm not going to be able to predict that the whole chain in digital, if you've seen those charts that lay out all the different players, will have to collapse a bit because there's just too much money going in too many different places. I can't predict that, but I don't think it will look the same as it does today in 5 years. I think data will be more important. How we employ that will be a question for everyone, but I think what you'll see is many of the tasks that are now done manually will be automated, and it will free people up to think more about what's happening, and that will be very valuable for all sides.
Ellen, are there industry truisms that don't tend to change over time?
Yes, because we have to remember we're dealing with people, and people are biologically created in ways that don't particularly change. So we have to remember that it's not just the rational, it's the emotional that matters to people. We have to remember that we've always, in the ad and media industries, looked at people within that context and known that while on the one hand you can measure an action, at the end of the day, it's not just the action that matters. There's a lot of activity that precedes that action that's very important to causing that action. We used to call that branding and DR. It's still called that, but it takes on many different forms today. And understanding that we need to appreciate the complexity, not shy away from it, I think is important to realizing the real value proposition for media and for media buyers.